Greetings and salutations, young true believers. All right, so the end of the week, Thursday, we are starting up our debate about free will. Um, this is a long-standing, despite what you'll occasionally hear, like for example, the 19th century German philosopher argues that the debate about free will is invented by Christian priests to make people feel guilty about their sexual urges. That's nonsense. Philosophers have been debating the existence of free will since ancient Greek times at the latest, right? This is a long standing philosophical debate. And it centers around two very important beliefs that every single human being on the planet holds dear. What are these two beliefs? Well, the first belief is the cornerstone of science. And that belief is all events are caused by preceding events and the laws of nature. And you found this out when you were a little kid. You had a ball, a tennis ball, you threw it up in the air, it fell down, and it came back down every single time. You found out every single time you touched a hot surface, you got burned, right? That's consistency in the natural world. It's consistency in your perceptions, right? What the great Scottish philosopher David Hume called observed regularities. And this has been codified in a doctrine known as the principle of sufficient reason. This is formulated by the German philosopher G.W. Leibniz. And the principle of sufficient reason is thus: for any given phenomenon, there's a cause of that phenomenon, and we can, in principle, discover the cause of that phenomenon. This is the basic assumption, the fundamental assumption that all scientists make when they formulate scientific hypotheses. Now, the other belief that human beings guide themselves by, and this one is also near and dear to our hearts, is that human beings, at least occasionally, act freely, right? We do things not because we're compelled to, not because we're obeying, so to speak, a natural law, but because we wish it to happen. So you get up in the morning, you have options: green tea, orange juice, coffee, right? And you make a decision. Some of our decisions are obviously far more momentous, right? Whether to major in accounting or major in nursing, right? But still, we think a freely arrived at decision. Now, it should be noted, as interesting as this debate is, and it is an interesting debate, the stakes are much, much, much higher. They're high because if we don't have free will, if free will is a complete illusion, then that means we have no moral responsibility. And that is, in short, a catastrophe, because that means no one is responsible for any awful thing that they ever did. Of course, that ain't been said, no one's responsible for any good thing that they ever did either. Praise and blame, if we have no free will, are meaningless, empty concepts. Now, we hold that first belief: all things are caused by preceding events and the laws of nature, dear. We hold the second belief: human beings at least occasionally act freely, equally dear. But there's a problem. Obviously, they contradict each other, right? So the task of philosophers who investigate this question is whether or not our belief in natural necessity, as it's known, can be reconciled with our belief in human agency, human freedom. This is what's known as the problem of free will. Now, uh, as we noted when we were talking about consciousness, right? This is a debate, a philosophical debate that science has recently, very recently, begun to take seriously, right? For those of you who are studying psychology, you might have heard of the name Benjamin Libet or John Dylan Haynes. Well, in the 80s and 90s, Libet and Haynes conducted several experiments trying to gauge whether or not human beings have free will. Now, to let the cat out of the bag, all that their research showed was that your brain is involved in decision making, which is a revelation, right? I mean, who knew? Still, it's interesting when I ask psychology students whether or not the professors talk to them about free will in their psychology classes. They note that it only really comes up in abnormal or criminal psychology classes, and even then it's kind of in passing, right? This is something that most psychologists still don't want to touch with a 10-foot pole, but this is an extremely important debate. It's extremely important because it's just interesting in and of itself, but as I noted, the stakes are higher, and everything that we're going to do once we get past this in ethics, right? Ethical theory and applied ethics works on the assumption that human beings have free will, right? So really quickly, let's survey the competing positions. The first position in this debate is determinism, or sometimes referred to as hard determinism. And that's the view that free will is an illusion. No one acts freely. Human beings are no exception to the rule. Everything else in the universe obeys natural necessity, and so do humans, right? Um, a corollary of this view is a view known as incompatibilism, which is that if determinism is true, then human free will can't exist because they're incompatible. The second view in this debate is what's known as libertarianism. Now, libertarianism in this debate is not to be confused with capital L libertarianism, the political view. They're completely different. Libertarianism is the view that human beings, at least occasionally, act completely freely. Nothing influences or forces our decisions. We just make free decisions, right? The problem with this view is what's known as ultimate responsibility. If your beliefs are not influenced by the causal chain in any way, shape, or form, then that means they seem to arise spontaneously, and that doesn't seem to be free either. What would it mean to make a decision that's not based on any of your prior experiences? It's a very difficult view to reconcile. The third position in this debate is what's known as compatibilism or soft determinism. And compatibilism is the view that even though determinism is the truth of the natural world, human beings can still act freely. So this is a view that really trips a lot of students up. And an example will help clear this up. So if you are an American living in San Jose, California, you've probably tried Indian food at some point, right? You've tried chana masala or palak paneer, right? And you might like it. It might be your favorite dish. But if you had been born in, say, the Amazon rainforest to an indigenous uncontacted tribe, you never would have had the experience of Indian food. It couldn't be a real option for you, right? So that's what the compatibilists are saying. The causal chain influences our decisions, but it does not force our decisions. And so we can still be free. We can reconcile the deterministic nature of the world with our intuitions that we're free. And this is a point that many philosophers have noted, right? It's still the case, even to this day, that the best evidence that human beings have free will is that it feels like we have free will. We have intuitions that we are free. It seems the most natural thing in the world that when you sit down, you can stand back up if you wish to. When you walk into a store, you can get coffee or tea. It's not a problem, right? So we feel like we're free, and that's still the best evidence that we're free. But as I noted, again, this is a debate that scientists have finally really begun to take seriously, and we'll see some developments along this front in the years to come. But you might find this one of the most fascinating debates in the entire class, so by all means, weigh in.